welcome back. I'm Tedward, and today, thanks to Bond Group in Waltham, Massachusetts, we're driving a 2024 Porsche 911 Targa 4 GTS. This one is equipped with a 7-speed manual gearbox, which is always nice to see, even though we've entered the 992 generation. In fact, the 992.2s are coming out now, so this is already the previous generation before the facelift. But there are some certain things about the 992.1 that I think will always be greater appreciated, the price notwithstanding, because my goodness, the 992.2 prices are going up quite a bit. This has 473 horsepower, 420 pound-feet of torque from its 3-liter twin-turbo flat-6, rear-mounted, of course. It's a 911. It has rear axle steer. It's got center lock wheels, which can be a bit of a pain if you need to change a tire on the side of the road and don't have the correct tools, or your tow truck driver isn't well versed in Porsches. But they do look mighty darn cool. This one is outfitted in chalk. It has a black roof, and it's got the black calipers, because when you do red or yellow, it looks a little silly. I've spent more time in the 991.2 GTS Targas, and those are great cars. Those manual transmissions are okay. I think the 7-speed in the 992 versus the 991, it's a little more forgiving. I always felt like the 1.2 in the 991 felt a little heavy. It feels like that flywheel is like 1,000,000 pounds, and you got to be a little ginger with it on that 1.2, and then everything kind of smooths out. This car, the 992, I feel like they just made it flow a little bit better. This one has the 930 leather package, which is pretty darn beautiful. You can see it on these door cards, which I believe was only reserved for the Turbo S variants, which are quite expensive. However, at an MSRP with all the options of $193,000, this wasn't exactly a bargain. But the thing I love about Targas is that they kind of do it all. And if you get a Targa 4, well, it's all-wheel drive. You get rear steer, so it feels incredibly nimble in small spaces. It feels long and stable at high speeds. It's the one-car solution. So you don't need a GT3 or a turbo. This is already plenty darn fast. It's gonna handle great, and you can commute to work in it, and you're not gonna feel that bad for stacking miles on a Targa. So I do think the Targa has this really beautiful sweet spot in the market, just because it does something that not many vehicles can do. This is a proper daily driver sports car, and the beautiful thing about Targas is that from 993 to 997, there was a real slump because Targas weren't really Targas. This beautiful hoop that we have here went away for a long time, and the Targas we had just had essentially glorified sunroofs that came all the way back. They were a little goofy. They're not as desirable, but I do think they still have a special place. I'm not saying they're not great cars, but the hoop is the thing. The ability to basically have this incredible curved glass with no visibility blind spots. You can see everything out of the car is wonderful, and you're not sacrificing safety by having a full convertible. Now, of course, in the modern day, you'd have roll bars and things like that would pop up, but back in the 70s and 80s, a convertible was a little bit of a death sentence, and the Targa gave you the ability to roll this car and have a structural hoop. But of course, it's also there to increase rigidity, so you don't have this massive sacrifice for chopping the roof off of the vehicle. Anyway, I wish I could show you the engine. I cannot. There's really nothing to show you back there. You've got some frunk space in the front, which I'll show you real quick in case you're here for practical reasons. But Porsches are just easy to live with. This, I don't even think, has a front axle lift. So that's the ride height. And, some people may say, oh, you need to lower it. But to me, I'm like, well, you know what? It gets over the speed bumps. Deep frunk, lovely. I've got some stuff in here, but you can fit some serious baggage in there if you need to. And here's the other thing. Look at this. Watch. Click, easy to close. This is not some trick system where you have to get it just right. Everything with these cars is so livable, which is funny because part of its livability is almost like a detractor, because you're like, oh, is it really a sports car if it's that easy to use? But it is. It's wonderful. So let's get it started up. We no longer have to place a key inside anything. So this is permanent. I've got the regular key fob, which looks the same as it always really did, in my pocket. I just don't have to place it in there. So then we have our 7-speed. I do wish it was a 6-speed. We'll talk about that when we're driving, and start it up. Front and center is an analog tachometer. with a needle. It's a real thing. It's not a screen. And this is where the 992.2, I think, really jumped the shark. Because look, it was one thing to take away our inserting our key in the left-hand side. Now they've made this a button, a push to start, and they've taken away the tachometer. So color me crazy, but I do think Porsche will eventually bring back this tachometer, not a screen. They'll make a real tach, but it's only going to be available in some special models. Think 911 ST. Ooh, we love the silver deviated stitching and the seat belts. It's funny, it's all those little trinkety things in 911s that make them feel especially special. Now, our parking release down here in 992 world is in the center. In 991 world, it was down here, and I would almost exclusively push it the wrong way every single time. Here, we've got our buttons laid out pretty nicely. HVAC controls down here. I love that not everything is a touchscreen, and these all feel wonderful. They have the little bronze shavers for these things, and because this isn't PDK, it's a manual, I don't have the bronze shaver for my gear lever. Right here, we've got our drive mode, so I can go from normal to Sport Plus, or set it up for myself in individual, or wet mode, depending on the conditions. We'll leave it in Sport. That's going to turn on our exhaust. We also have PDCC for stability and all that good stuff, but this is just so easy to drive. And like I said, I know it sounds crazy, but the 7-speed in the 991.2s, I just think they kind of missed the mark on the feeling of it. It didn't quite hit, and it's very cold out today, so I'm going to throw my heated seat on. I've got my vents going, blowing nice warm air on me, and this is the beauty of this car, is that I can drive it around even in like 40-degree weather with the Targa top down. Look at this, we're just pulling out of the office park. No big deal. What I like about it too is that, I don't know, maybe this is a detractor. To me, this doesn't look like $200,000. So there's a good and a bad about that. The good is that if you're at work in a $200,000 car, people are going to be like, hey, they're not paying me enough, especially if you're the boss, okay? You're probably going to get in a little trouble. Or maybe it makes it look like you're making more than your boss somehow, and that can always be a weird thing. So you can kind of get away with driving this. The bad thing is if you spend 200 grand on a car and you want people to know about it, this maybe doesn't scream, I spent a lot of money. But let's get out on the road. Goodness, we've got a bit of wind buffeting, which, you know, to me has always been a little bit of an issue in the 992. I know I've got the windows up, so that makes sense, but I like driving like this and not having all the intrusion, but unfortunately this is like a big parachute, so you do get a bit of wind buffeting. I'm actually going to pull over, auto blip in sport mode, and I'm going to put the Targa roof up, and we're going to see how that behaves as well, because you know what? Old Teddy needs to be warm once in a while. I deserve to have one warm drive this winter. Look at this. Hangs way out. Actually, not as far over the back as the previous generation did, but it is really cool the way this whole mechanism works. That's the price of admission. Definitely worth it. And unquestionably way cooler than a convertible. It's a wonderful sound. And I don't know if I'd be walking down the middle of this street. It seems odd, but okie doke. Anyway, these have a lot of power, and Porsche always seemingly underrates their cars, because when you see 473 horsepower, I don't know, that for whatever reason in 2025, that doesn't strike me as a particularly large number. But my God, this thing friggin' moves. It feels faster than those numbers suggest. So if you're just looking at numbers and thinking, I don't know, I want something with 600 horsepower, like, this thing's quick, and I'm sure you can tune it up to get well into those numbers. Go nice and easy because we got a soft shoulder over here. Yikes. These cars are so outrageously stable and ready to boogie. Like, this is the thing. When I say this is the do-all vehicle, yes, it will take you to work. It'll drive you up to the mountain house or the lake house or whatever. It'll do those long distances. Look at this, no nose lift, and it just tackles the big speed bumps, no problems. You're not gonna have to worry about valeting at the Ocean Club. It can also do the sports car thing really well. This will like, you go out on a mountain cruise with your buddies and they've all got GT3s, they're not gonna leave you for dead. Like, this thing mobs. It's so fast and it's so easy and confidence inspiring to pitch into a corner and just full send. The shift actuation is pretty nice, but it is not that of a GT3. I gotta say, it does feel a little cheaper than the GT3 6-speeds, and I prefer those. It's probably the point. I mean, they probably want you to feel like you're getting more out of your GT3 than your like non-GT spec 911. But I just don't necessarily see the purpose of the 7-speed. I guess maybe it was originally for the sake of emissions. Like, okay, throw in a stupid long 6 gear. That's fine. I'll drive around in 5th most of the time if I have to. That's cool. I'm down with it. But I guess what frustrates me is just it seems extra, and I'm not a fan of 7-speed manuals. They usually drive me a little bit nuts. Like, I'll tolerate them. Some are better than others. This is not an Aston Martin 7-speed. Those to me are the absolute worst. These are livable. They're good, but I would always just prefer it to be a 6-speed. And like, when you're driving around normal, like, I'm just cruising. We're not going to go out, like, do anything insane today. We're just going to go enjoy the car. And that's the point of this, is that it is a sports car that you should go put 100,000 miles on. You should, like, burn out your Targa. Your Targa should be, like, completely overused. It should be a winter car. It should be a summer car. It should be a commuter car. It should be your fun car. Like, this can do it all. You don't have to buy 3 911s because you get a lot of the experience out of this one vehicle. Great puppies ahead, but always a good reminder of why we don't speed around blind corners, because you know what? Those two dogs could just be standing there. And maybe you hate people, but I'm sure you don't hate dogs. Plate, so I'm assuming they will not move over for me. what this car is like really good at. It's just flying on torque. It's so easy to just get moving. Look at that. 7th gear at 60 miles an hour is like 1,500 RPM. It's just so silly. And look, it sends me into 4th because it's like, yo, we gotta go. Must be done. Not as good as the old 3.8s and the 991.1 Carreras, but these are still plenty good. It's more speed than you'll ever need, like straight up. I know that's crazy. This is where it gets annoying that it's a 7-speed because I go for 5th and I'm like, okay, wait a minute, I don't want to go for 7th. Okay, anyway, I'm going to stop griping about that. I just think that these cars are so ridiculously fast that the Turbo and Turbo S now are now more like statements of wealth or insanity. Like, I've driven Turbo S's on tracks and on the street and done a million launch controls, and they're brutal. They'll make you nauseous, and they're fun, but it's just like wholly unnecessary. It's almost like a showcase of what can be done with a 911 chassis. Whereas like this is where you're like, wow, that's plenty. I can use it. I can't use all of it all the time. But having it as a manual is just such a treat. I think nobody realizes you can go straight here. So then the question becomes PDK or manual. I do actually think there's a great sense of occasion with this manual, so I would adapt to the 7-speed very quickly. And I like having a clutch. I do enjoy driving a Porsche with a clutch. The PDK is fantastic, but there is a little bit of just sensation lost when you opt for the paddles. The beauty, though, is that you'll never have to feel a cold 1-2 in your PDK car, where that's something that you'll be maybe more acutely aware of if you're driving your Targa 4 GTS in the winter. But either way, this thing is just so much fun, and the beauty is you should get it with this 7-speed because it's not a lap time car. It doesn't need to prove much to anybody in the way of like going on a racetrack or 0 to 60s and things like that. I mean, it sure will do the thing, but you know, who are you showing off to? This car is for your enjoyment and pleasure, basically exclusively. this car will do in third gear that other sports cars wish they could do at all. I mean, you could break every gear in this car. You could have just third gear and probably still outrun most of your friends on a racetrack in whatever pedestrian things they're driving. Like, these cars are insanely capable. And, you know, it's a little cold. It's 43 degrees. I don't really want to find out the breakaway point on these tires in the cold, because it's going to be a little hockey pucky. So we're not going to send it too hard. But the other thing is, if you're worried about it being an all-wheel drive 911, I mean, I feel like we've proven that point in the past already, that they're good at it. They're good at being all-wheel drive. You know, a rear-wheel drive 911 still feels a little more proper, but it is just so capable, and you can get on power so early, and it still has that 911 weight distribution where, you know, you can kind of feel out how much throttle you can give by the understeer that's getting presented to you, and you can tuck the nose in by lifting off that throttle. It's just such a fun thing to own, and I think you know, cars like this kind of democratize 911s for people who need something to fit into their lifestyle, and there's a 911 for everyone at this point. I mean, this is probably the longest named 911, right? Targa 4 GTS, that's a sentence. So while it may not have the fanfare of a GT3 or the psychotic launch of a Turbo S, this sits in a real sweet spot of being a true sports car that you can use. And I think that's gone. Like, there's very few real sports cars that people use and drive and live with out there anymore. It used to be a thing. Like, you know, you watch old movies where Steve McQueen plays a cop and he drives a speedster and, you know, does all these great things. Well, is that dead? I mean, now it feels like such an absurd choice to drive certain cars. And today, I think, like, these are sort of the last of those breeds where you can absolutely use this every single day and not feel like you're making this massive sacrifice just to stand out and have your thing. It's like, no, this is a usable day-to-day car. So anyway, before the prices of the 99, I don't think the 992 Targa, the new .2 Targa, is out yet. I'm not sure. It might be. But if it's not, I'm sure the price is like 40 grand more than this was. So I don't know. If you're looking for one, go get it, and get the one with a tachometer, because screens are stupid and it's just cost cutting and it's only saving Porsche money. It's not better. So now if you're looking for one of these, I'd say get the .1, because sure, in certain ways, I think the .2 will improve upon the .1, but this tachometer, I don't know, man. I don't want a screen for a tach. I want a tach. I wish this still had the 5-gauge layout of the days of yore, but it doesn't, and here we are. But I want this tachometer, and I don't see screens as better. Screens are not better. Screens can be better if they solve a problem, but this tachometer has never been a problem. In fact, it probably just saves Porsche money on this tachometer by making it into a screen, and that's not for me. So thank you guys so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one. Usable, fast as heck, impresses everybody, but not so ostentatious that you look like a jerk. It's the perfect balance.